birthday boy.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of my favorite sayings of Mark Twain is that history doesn't always repeat itself, but it usually rhymes. And in this case, I'm thinking back to the predecessor in my Senate seat, Edmund Muskie of Maine, who wrote the Clean Water Act. And the Clean Water Act passed in 1970 after immense effort by Senator Muskie unanimously. Can you imagine? The Clean Water Act passed the United States Senate unanimously. And it seems to me that what we're talking about today is a solvable problem. We need these minerals. We need to cut off our dependency on other countries that are unreliable or even hostile. To me, that's just common sense. We also need to protect our watersheds and our rivers and our natural resources and our communities. This is an engineering problem. And I have worked in energy permitting. I've been an advocate for development over my life. In fact, next year marks the 40th year since I went into the alternative energy business. And what I said when I was governor of Maine is I want the strongest, most far-reaching environmental laws in the country and the most timely and predictable permitting process. I don't think the permitting process itself should be used as a weapon to stop a project. We need to, but I agree, I find myself in the unusual position of agreeing with Senator Barrasso. By the way, I think that's one of the most effective uses of visual data that I've ever seen, and it really does make an important point. We've got to have one-stop permitting. We've got to have coordination between the state and the federal government. This doesn't mean lowering the standards. It doesn't mean skipping steps. It doesn't mean avoiding difficult issues. But Ms. Wolf, am I on the right track here? I mean, it just seems to me this is in the nature of a scientific and an engineering problem, and we should be able to solve it so that we can permit necessary projects for national security within a reasonable period of time.
I couldn't agree with you more, Senator King, and thank you for your work and your interest on this issue. I was so like, wow, when you held up that chart earlier, but I really do think that our regulatory regime is really one of our greatest strengths as well. We want to make sure that the energy transition is responsible and clean, and we do think that doing that within the United States and among like-minded nations will help to achieve that. As you mentioned, the technology is rapidly advancing, and we are able to do things much more cleanly than we have in the past. But what we also need to recognize is that we need much more robust and meaningful community participation on the front end as well to help make sure that we can communicate to people, and that's partly what I'm trying to do here today, is that we really do need these things. It should be a bipartisan issue. And so as humans, nothing that we do is zero impact. So how can we make sure that we can have as responsible of an impact as possible? And I think that, it's not cutting corners. Streamlining the permitting process is required, but, maintaining these high standards that we have in the United States and trying to figure out just how virtuous are we and are there any loopholes and can we improve is important.
Well, I think that you use the phrase, nothing we do is zero impact, and I think you use that phrase as well. And that's important. Well, the one thing I've learned in energy over 40 years is there's no free lunch. Everything has a cost and an impact, and if you want wind power, you're going to have to look at them on top of the ridges, and if you want solar, a lot of farm fields are going to disappear. And you're going to have the minerals, and either the choice is we import them from possibly hostile countries, or we develop them ourselves. I think the chairman is absolutely right. Within North America, from friendly countries, we can develop a supply chain. We don't have to be entirely dependent on indigenous resources. But we've got to recognize that, and the environmental community has to recognize, if they want electrification, they've got to understand that the materials necessary to make that a possibility there are going to be impacts, and the question is, how do we minimize them, protect against them, and develop a rational permitting system where the system itself doesn't become an impediment to the development of the word is critical resources.
I agree. I think that they need to be thought of as clean energy land uses.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have Senator Daines here.